Yuta's domain is here and it's already dealing heavy damage to Ryomen Sukuna in his true Heian form. His domain, all-encompassing unequivocal love, might actually be the very strongest domain expansion we have seen in the entire series. Yes, that includes Gojo and Sukuna's domain as well. It is nothing short of broken, phenomenal, and just badass, to be honest, and that's what we'll be talking about today, since a lot of people are actually confused about this domain and how it works, and I'll be breaking down in depth everything about this domain that you'll need to know moving forward. So hey, be sure to leave a like, it helps out a ton, thank you. And of course, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe for a ton of consistent and quality JJK content just like this. Less than 10% of people who actually watch my videos are subscribed, so if you love JJK, I promise you will not regret subscribing. And of course, thank you to the special members of the channel, it is much appreciated. Alright, let us get right into this video. So the very first thing we need to talk about is the actual name. There's a lot of different translations for the actual domain name. We have authenticity love, we have true mutual love, and we also have all-encompassing unequivocal love. And this isn't including the official name which Viz will be giving on Sunday, but so far I really love all-encompassing unequivocal love. That is such a badass name, and a lot of people are actually complaining saying the name sucks. I actually think in the actual Japanese itself it's called Shingan Sohai, and the actual Japanese it actually sounds pretty badass. I mean, just imagine when we get the anime however long in the future and Yuta says domain expansion Shingan Sohai. It's just when you translate into English it doesn't sound as cool. I still like the name though. Now, what does this domain actually do? Why am I saying that this domain is better than Unlimited Void and Malevolent Shrine? And I truly do believe that. Well, this domain is unique because it gives two very powerful functions. The first one is, just like every single domain we have seen, it gives you a sure hit. And in Yuta's case, it seems like he can actually choose between all of the abilities that he's copied in his arsenal. He can actively pick and put one as the sure hit of the domain. So for example, if he's copied Malevolent Shrine, his sure hit of his own domain would be Cleavenous Mantle, or if he's copied the 10 Shadows, the sure hit would be the 10 Shadows Curse technique. In the actual fight itself with Ryomen Sukuna, Sukuna theorizes, and it's most likely true, that the sure hit of the domain is actually Angel's Curse technique, since if that hits Sukuna as a sure hit, it would just kill him. Not only because Sukuna is a purely evil being, but also because he's an incarnated sorcerer and he's housing two souls, so it would just rip him apart right then and there. But what's interesting about this domain is that this domain, unlike other domains, where every domain in the series actually gives you an active stat boost to your own curse technique function, and this was actually said by Gojo during the Jogo fight, Yuta's domain not only makes his curse technique however much stronger like every other domain does when you're in the area, which is natural, it gives him a tremendous stat boost that we have seen from no other domain in the entire series. So all of the swords that you see here on the screen, it is a field of swords just everywhere. It really looks like Byakuya's domain expansion, or Ichigo when he was training for his Bankai, or even Unlimited Blade Works. It really does look like that. Each sword has a curse technique that Yuta has copied. What ends up happening is he can pick any sword out of the lot and he can swing it on Sukuna, and at max power, whatever curse techniques on it will hit Sukuna. So in this chapter, Yuta actually hits Sukuna with Thin Iced Breaker, also known as Thin Ice Missile, and that actually did some pretty good damage to Sukuna, where we're actually seeing true form Sukuna bleed, which is an insane feat, by the way. I know a lot of people are trying to downplay the feat, but it is impressive because this is still true form Ryomen Sukuna that he did this to. And in Sukuna's own words, in the domain, copy seems liberated from all restrictions as well. And we know this because Yuta has access to all of his copy techniques while Rika still is not fully manifested. Rika, as we see by the end of the chapter, still has that black cloak around her, and we don't see her hair or body, so she's still actually in a partially manifested state. Yuta has not activated the 5 minutes yet, and he's got access to all of his curse techniques with no restrictions, and he can pick one out at any time he wants. And I want to remind you that all of these swords containing his curse technique and removing all of the limiters placed on his curse technique for copy, this is not actually his sure hit. This is just the actual domain boost itself, and this is what I mean by Yuta has the strongest domain in the series. Other characters have stronger sure hits, such as Unlimited Void unquestionably probably is one of the strongest sure hits in the entire series. But for the actual domain itself, Yuta's is by far the best. When you take away the sure hits of all the domains and just have the domain themselves, nothing gives any sorcerer a boost like this. It is truly incredible. And what it actually reminds me of is Megumi. Like I said earlier in the video, just by activating your domain expansion, you naturally get a buff, and we saw this with Megumi's own domain where he actually got a 120% buff, and do remember that this counts even if you have a sure hit in the domain, as again, this was said by Gojo. But Yuta's domain, it seems to be far more than just a 120% buff. In this domain, it truly seems like Yuta, he's just monstrous, because remember, he still has Rika with him. Although we didn't see Rika act up in this chapter, she is there by the end of the chapter. We see her, and if he decides to fully manifest Rika, well, now you're up against Yuta with no restriction on his curse technique, with his curse technique also now being buffed, and of him also actually being able to use the copy techniques to a much stronger and more efficient degree, because you can just have them in swords and swing them at you and they explode the technique on your face. But you also have to deal with Rika too inside of the domain. And considering the fact that Sukuna says copy is liberated from all restrictions, I do actually take this as you can use any curse technique any number of times. So some people were thinking that Thin Iced Missile is probably gone because we see the sword actually vanish when Yuta uses it, but considering Sukuna's own words and what we know of copy, this shouldn't be the case at all, since remember, Yuta did use Thin Ice Missile against Ryu, and it's not like he lost the technique after using it once, and he actually used it twice. Once the normal technique of Uro the Sky to deflect Ryu's attack, and again, like I just said, Thin Ice Missile to break Ryu's guard. And he still has it in this own domain, and considering the number of swords, there could be multiple versions of the same curse technique in each sword, or it could even be possible that, let's say Uro's sword that was just used, it may actually be recreated inside of the domain. And what's also possible is that these swords don't actually contain any curse technique themselves, but it's once Yuta picks them up, it actually imbues a copied curse technique into it. So all the swords that you see are basically any curse technique that Yuta wants, and they'll turn into that curse technique once he picks it up. And do remember that Yuta, at least from what Sukuna thinks, does believe that Yuta has Angel's curse technique. So if he were to swing one of these swords on Sukuna and it begins to evaporate him, or at least does a lot of damage since it does counter Sukuna hard, as we discussed before, yeah, that would be absolutely insane. Or imagine we see Yuta swing and he actually hits Sukuna with a red or a blue or maybe even a hollow purple from Gojo. Or what I personally want to see is if he hits Sukuna with a swing and it's actually a Granite Blast, Ryu's curse technique that maybe he copied from Ryu while Ryu was passed out. And this is what I mean by it being the strongest domain in the entire series. For most domains that we've seen, for example, how Reggie was going to counter Megumi's domain, or how Kenjaku would have countered Yuki's domain as said by Tengen. All you need to do is simply activate New Shadow Style or Hollow Wicker Basket, or even an anti-domain technique such as Falling Blossom Emotion, which isn't a simple domain, and you're pretty much good. You've negated the sure hit of the domain, and you no longer need to worry about that, and you can just fight the sorcerer even if they're boosted a bit. Whereas in Yuta's domain, it's truly like night and day the difference between not being in there and being inside of his domain, regardless of the sure hit that the sorcerer that Yuta is facing has to worry about, because we see Sukuna is being heavily nerfed as he constantly has to activate Hollow Wicker Basket with one of his mouths and also two of his arms. Now imagine if this was any other sorcerer that doesn't have the benefit that Sukuna has. All of a sudden they'll have to constantly worry about keeping their simple domain up at all times and for it to not be stripped, because not everyone's going to be Sukuna and their simple domain isn't going to be godlike. Their simple domain will eventually strip out. While you're worrying about that and just surviving the sure hit and not letting it kill you, you have to worry about Yuta basically having unlimited blade works and slamming you with his copied curse techniques that are amped with no restrictions. And also Yuta's domain has a lot of symbolism specifically to himself and Rika. And shout out my guy Dandada Migraine, I actually found it from his post on Twitter, and the post that he actually said comes from someone called regular_budget1864, and I'll be reading this directly from him. The knots in the background resemble Mizuhiko, a type of knot-based Japanese artwork used on formal letters and wedding invitations, which also fits with the domain being the union of Rika's copying and curse tools. So again, shout out regular_budget and Dandadan for that information, but it is really cool. I mean, again, the whole idea of the promise of marriage between Yuta and Rika, the curse that actually binded them together, and we actually see that as Yuta casts domain expansion, the ring does glow, the marriage ring between Yuta and Rika. And like we see in the background of the domain constantly, this knot, the Mizuhiko, is around the entire domain, so it might just seem like random background art at first, but it's actually got a really cool meaning considering everything between Yuta and Rika, and I just absolutely love that symbolic nature of the domain. But if you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like, it helps out a ton, thank you. And of course, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe for a ton of consistent and quality JJK content just like this. Like I said in the beginning, less than 10% of people who actually watch my channel are subscribed, so if you love JJK, I promise you, you won't regret subscribing. And of course, thank you to all the channel members as well, it is always much appreciated. Thank you guys very much, but that's all from me. Have a great day and take care everyone.